Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 47. Let's continue right where we left off. So last time we covered the linked X4 modifier. Next we have map scaler. So I will go ahead and use the plane object to demonstrate the map scaler. So here is this material. Let's just say it's the old displacement material. Let me go ahead and use this one. So here is a basic material. If you want to tile this material, you have several options. Of course, you can always go into your material, into your bitmap settings, and here you have tiling settings. So this is 1 by 1, that's the default. If I want this to be tiled more, I can change this to say 5 by 5. And now it's much more tiled, much more detailed. Another way you can do this is by using the map scaler modifier, which will scale your map. So as you can see, as soon as I activate the modifier, it changes the diffuse settings here. It changes the UV map. So now I can change the scale, and that will scale my map. So this is useful when you want to scale a variety of objects. You can select all the objects, apply the map scaler, and they will all be affected by the modifier. Now remember that you can have a modifier be instanced among multiple objects. You can do that in two ways. You can just select them all and select the modifier. And now you see the modifier is in italics, which means it has been instanced. So basically, if I change it here, if I turn it off here, you can see it's turned off everywhere. And when I change the settings on one, they are all changed. So I can go ahead and select all of them, and their shared modifier will be right here. So if I go ahead and delete that, you can see it's no longer in italics because it's no longer instanced. What I can do is I can right click and click on copy. I can select this, and I can either paste or paste instanced, which means that I have the same effect as if I had selected these both objects and apply Turbo Smooth. So you can also paste instanced modifiers. So if I select this and click on copy, I can then select all these, or if you have multiple selected, you can't paste selected, so you have to do it one at a time. I can paste an instanced copy of that map scaler modifier. So map scaler, quite simple. Next we have our material modifier. This is a very simple one. Here, for the next modifier, I have prepared this little SubMaterial. So regular materials, you just have, one material here. However, there's another type of material called the multi-sub-object material. This allows you to put multiple materials into one. And then you can change it using go into polygon, select. Okay, so right now, if I press Control A, I go into my material IDs. You can see they all have a ID of 1. I can change it by selecting the polygons that I want to change and entering 2. And now you can see that those polygons have changed because they now have the second material right here. I have one material called dark, which is simply black diffuse. I have another one called light, which is simply a yellow diffuse with self-illumination. And you can simply change which material you have by changing the material ID right here. And you can have a huge number of materials under one sub-object. And the reason you would want this is so you can have one object with multiple materials. But the material modifier allows you to set the entire object to one ID very quickly. And you can see how it goes between, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see that even though this material subobject, multi-subobject material, has two submaterials, it will alternate between those two. So it doesn't have 14, but it still knows that 14 connects to 2. And next we have an interesting modifier. So here is a quick object I made. It's made up of two objects. Just pretend this is a skyscraper. So here's the skyscraper kind of concrete part of it, and here are windows. And elements are every object that is not connected. So these polygons, these are all simple polygons, and if I go into the element mode, you can see they are all individual elements because they are not connected. If I connect them, they are no longer two different elements, they are now just one element. So okay, I'll just go ahead and align that. So the next modifier, is the MaterialByElement. What this will do is this will randomly assign different subobjects, different submaterials to random elements. So this is the purpose for this material that I have here. This is an office building, and you can quickly create windows, some dark, empty, and some used, by using this simple multi-subobject and the MaterialByElement modifier. So here's how it works. You have two options here. You have random distribution and you have list frequency. The list frequency allows you to enter various percentages of which submaterial do you want to be used the most. So let's say we have an office building that's in full use, almost full use. What I'm going to do is I want there to be mostly lights. So what I would do is I will go into material number 2, material ID number 2. I'll enter in 95, and for material ID 1, I'll enter in 5. So you can see now this office building is mostly occupied and being used, and there's only 3 rooms that are not being used. Now let's say that it's getting closer to closing time and more people are leaving. Well, then I'll just go ahead and enter 50 and 50, and it will randomly assign 50% of the elements to 1 and the other 50% to 2. So now we have an office building that's being people are leaving, and now we can say that it's very close to closing, just got a few people wrapping things up. So 95% will be 1, which is dark, and the other will be 5, which is light. So here we go. We just have 1 room left, and I can go ahead and maybe increase it a little bit. Let's say 10 and 90. There we go. Now I have 3 people left. So the MaterialByElement modifier can be used for an effect like this. And once I start teaching you guys about materials, I will go into more detail about the multi-subobject material. Next we have the melt modifier. It's a very simple modifier. You just go ahead and apply it, and you have some parameters. The melt parameter, as you increase it, you can see the sphere begins to melt. Very simple. You have your spread, you have your solidity, ice, glass, jelly, plastic, or custom, and you have which axis you would like to melt. So I can animate the sphere melting. Simply I'll press Auto key. Let me see. Auto key. I'll go into frame. I'll go all the way to 100, right? And make the amount, make it melt like this. Now you'll notice it's clipping into itself. Whenever you notice something flickering, that indicates clipping. So in order to help out this modifier, I will apply a push modifier and increase the push value a bit. There we go. So what that's doing is that's pushing out the geometry according to the normals, and it kind of thickens it out. And one thing I did here is I accidentally animated the push value. What I'm going to do is turn off auto key and just okay, and let's see it turbo smooth. Alright, so let's see this quick animation in progress. There we go. It's a very simple effect, and that's the melt modifier. Simple is not always bad. However, in most cases, if you're working on a complex effect, you would want more control over your object. The melt material, it's good for what it does, but it probably doesn't offer that much control. Next we have the mesh select. Okay, so the mesh select is pretty much like the edit poly modifier, except it's only used for selecting faces. So just imagine the edit poly modifier, but without all the editing tools. So if you want to have a modifier affect only a part of your mesh, you would first put on your mesh select modifier, indicate which part you want to be affected, and then apply the modifier. Let's say bend, for example. However, you can easily use a variety of different modifiers to do the same thing. You can use the edit poly modifier, you can use mesh select, which I just showed you, and you can also use poly select. You can use any of those modifiers to pass the selection up. So I can easily use edit poly to do the same thing. Next we have mesh smooth. So mesh smooth is similar to turbo smooth, except it gives us more options. So Iceland display is on by default. Let me go ahead and set the iterations to 3. So we have this right here, NURMS, stands for non-uniform rational mesh smooth, and that pretty much does the same thing as turbo smooth. So as you can see, it gives us pretty much the same results as turbo smooth. However, mesh smooth has additional subdivision methods like classic, which will give you this, and quad output. With this, you can also change go into your subobject modes, edge, and you can change the crease value. It goes all the way up to 1. And the higher the crease value, the more sharper the edge will be. So at a crease value of 1, if I increase the iterations, you can see it's giving me a perfect square result. Similar to using turbo smooth with the smoothing groups option enabled, except you're not working with smoothing groups, you're working with the edges in the mesh smooth modifier. So if I select all the edges and decrease the crease amount, you can see that it goes from being smooth to sharp. So this is something you can use the mesh smooth modifier for. Of course, I prefer just to use control loops, but if you would like to keep your mesh simple, you can try using the mesh smooth modifier. Next we have mirror. So mirror is similar to using symmetry, except it just goes ahead and mirrors the object. Whereas with symmetry, it actually gives you a symmetrical geometry. So if you use the mirror tool, it's a good idea to reset your X forms because the mirror modifier can mess up your X forms. And in many situations, it might be better just to use the symmetry modifier, and you can go ahead and delete the part that you don't want. Next we have Morpher. Morpher is a very important modifier for animation, especially when you're doing like facial animation. And to give you a quick preview of what it does, let's say I select this plane here and I move these vertices up. Then I apply Morpher. Now what I do here is you have a bunch of channels here. And this only works with objects that have the same information in terms of vertices, edges, and polygons. If there's been a change to this object, like if I went ahead and added a cut to it, or welded some vertices, it would not work. They need to be identical. So the position can be different. The position is being different is okay, but they need to be identical in terms of the amount. They need to be identical in terms of topology. So now I'll go right here, I'll go to pick object from scene and select this modified plane, and now the plane 02 has been added to this channel right here. I can rename it, I can give it a custom name, and I can go ahead and scroll this value up, and it will gradually morph to the final position here. So this can be useful for all sorts of facial animation, from opening a mouth to closing an eyelid. Let's say you have a face, a model of a face. What you would do is you would go ahead and duplicate the face. On your new face model, you would go ahead and close up the eye, select the vertices, close the eye, and then select that other face and enter it here, pick object from scene, and you could go ahead and rename it to something like eye left close, which means that this channel right here will control the movement of the left eye. You can use it, you can scroll this up to close and open up the left eye. And so once I start teaching you guys how to do animation with characters, the Morpher tool will really come in handy. A very nice little modifier. Next we have MultiRes. MultiRes is a modifier you can use to decrease the amount of geometry. So what you first need to do is scroll down here and click on Generate. You can take some time to calculate things if you have a very complex object. And now what you simply do is you can decrease the vertex percentage or the vertex count. And as you do this, it will gradually degrade the model. So if you guys want to simplify your models, I recommend doing it by hand because you get best results that way. However, if you want, if you're working on something like a rock or an unimportant background object, the MultiRes modifier can work for that because the object is in the background, or it's not very important, or it's a rock, and the rock topology is not that important because the rock is not going to bend or deform. So MultiRes would be fine for those kinds of objects. However, if you need something to deform, or if it's an important object, you won't want to use that. Next we have noise. Noise is a pretty good modifier. It can be used to add random deformations to your object. So let me go ahead and increase the amount of segments, and what you do is you set the strength in X, Y, and Z, and then you go ahead and decrease the scale, and as you do that, the object will begin to get noisy. Then you can also click on Check Fractal. That will make it even more noisy. So very nice for that. And of course, the more geometry you have, the smoother your noise will be. So noise is something that I use sometimes to add some quick deformations to my objects. Like if you want to add really detailed noise, it's better to sculpt it. But if you just want to add some quick noise, some quick unevenness to your object, you can use noise. So if I have like a box right here, like right here, and I'll go ahead and apply noise, I can just use this gradually to kind of add a little bit of damage to it. Just add a little bit of unevenness to this box. And of course, don't forget that you can control it using an edit poly modifier, poly select or mesh select. And now the noise is only affecting the top of this box. So noise is very helpful when you're making like destroyed machinery, like destroyed walls, destroyed wall panels. The noise is good for quickly adding some destruction. Like if I want this to be, let's say, a kind of a destroyed piece of wall, I would go ahead and tessellate it real quick, and perhaps FFD to quickly bend it. Add some bending parts. I'm just doing this very quickly. And let's say that it got mangled more on the front. I'll go ahead and soft selection. And now noise. So now it's like an effect of a piece of wall being broken and being mangled at this edge. Maybe later on, I think later on I'll give you a much better, more detailed, better looking method than this, but this is just a quick demonstration of the noise modifier. Just adding some ragged edges to the end. So thank you for watching and take care.